So in this video, I'm going to show you 5 fun and very powerful builds that you can use in patch 1.16 to just overall thrash the entirety of Elden Ring. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So the Bloody Martial Artist is going to focus on using Dane's footwork with a bleed affinity. We are going to be going with a primarily arcane build here, although there will be some dexterity thrown in. The main portion of this build is going to focus on Dryleaf Whirlwind. This is going to allow you to jump up through the air and build up bleed very quickly as you hit successive attacks with your kicks. Now we are going to be adding a bunch of items and talismans that are going to allow you to boost your damage even farther, and this build really excels against humanoid enemies. Although it builds up bleed just as fast as anybody who is susceptible to bleed, humanoid enemies, as you can see here with Melania, it actually staggers them into the point of not being able to attack you. And now I know bleed builds are incredibly overpowered, as we've seen many times throughout the entire life cycle of Elden Ring. I only have 1, maybe 2 bleed builds on this entire list, so definitely stay tuned for more builds that are a different variety than just bleed. But I'm really excited and stoked for how well this build turned out. I know that Dane's footwork has been rumored to be absolutely phenomenal with bleed, and I just had to try it out myself to see what I was missing out on. Now for this build, we're going to be using Dane's bloody footwork, and we're also going to be using a dagger with Golden Vow as a side. We're also going to be using the white mask for that blood loss, and then whatever armor set you would like to get you over 51 poise. Now for your talismans, I'm using the Retaliatory Cross Tree Talisman, as anytime you roll or backstep, you are going to get an increase in your attack. I'm using the Shattered Stone Talisman. I'm also using the Shard of Alexander and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Now for your foot armor, you can also use the Divine Warrior Bird Greaves, but I think they look incredibly dumb, so I did not use them for this build. Now for my flask, I'm using the Dexterity Knot Crystal tier as well as the Thorny Crack tier. And for my buffs, I am also using Flame Grant Me Strength. This is a level 150 build on New Game +3 with 55 Vigor, 16 Mind, 20 Endurance, 16 Strength, 40 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 60 Arcane. Now for this next build, it's my very first time using the Rock Heart for a incantation faith build, and let me tell you, I was not disappointed. The ability this build has to do damage is out of this world. We are going to be utilizing talismans that give us a lot more damage for having a small equip load. We're also going to be equipping a spear, but only for those moments where you get into close combat and you need something to hit your enemy. But other than that, this is a Dragon Communion build. I did not include any of Bale's skills, but as you're going to see here with this build, especially when we get to Malekith, you can 4-shot Malekith with this build if you do it right. I had an absolute blast playing with this build. The damage is phenomenal, the playstyle is a lot of fun, and this is definitely the equivalent of a glass cannon build. You are going to hit like an absolute truck, but you can only survive, especially in this New Game +6 that I'm showing you here, for 2 to 3 hits. Now with that being said, it doesn't deter me from playing this way, because all of the Dragon Communion skills that I'm using have the ability to either stagger or hit really hard, so you don't really have to worry about being hit, because medium, even larger size enemies are either going to get knocked over or they're going to be staggered, giving you enough time to recover to place your next Dragon Communion incantation. Now for this build, we are going to be using the short spear with a blood affinity on it, as we're going mainly into an arcane faith build. For our seal, we're using the Dragon Communion seal, which has an S scaling in arcane. We aren't wearing any armor because of the Rock Heart, so because of that, we are going to be wearing the Phlox Canvas Talisman, the Blue Dancer Charm, the Crimson Amber Medallion, which you can replace with a different medallion that boosts your incantations, and we're also using the Roar Medallion as well. For our flask, we're using the Opaline Hard tier and the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, as getting more damage negation and having more damage is going to be great for this build. And when it comes to your stats and different incantations, we're going to be using 55 Vigor, 25 Mind, 20 Endurance, 15 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 40 Faith, and 65 Arcane. This is a level 170 build on New Game +6. We're going to be using Dragon Claw, Dragon Maw, Greyall's Roar for getting that debuff on the enemy, giving them 20% extra damage taken. We're also using Borealis's Mist and Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. So next up, we're going to be looking at the Frost Sorcerer build. I put together a build with all the frost spells that I thought benefited it very well, and we are going to be using using the Glintstone Kris for our main weapon here. I absolutely love the Glintstone Kris, and I found that when using Frost, you really aren't going to get a ton of damage until you get that big Frost proc, and then after that, the Frost is there, but you need something else to do a decent amount of damage, so the Glintstone Kris's Ash of War is what our main damage dealer is going to be. Now, proccing Frost is going to be relatively easy considering we're using a ton of Frost sorceries, and this build is really great to stay at range and just whittle down your enemy before they get to you. Now, Frost is awesome because it gives you that great debuff that makes your enemy take 20% more damage, and one thing that I did add in this build that you're actually not going to see in the gameplay is the fact that I added Magma Shot to our sorceries as well. The reason being is that once Frost procs and you get that big chunk of damage on your enemy, you can either keep the debuff there or you can use Magma Shot and unproc the Frost so you can start building it up again. This is a really fun cycle to play through, and with the Glintstone Kris adding just that little bit extra damage, it is a really easy to use build. So for this build, we're using the Carrion Glintstone Kris. We're also going to be using the Carrion Glintstone Staff for the extra boost to the Carrion Sword sorceries. We're using the Frost Witch Hat for extra damage to Frost sorceries. Whatever other armor set you would like to, I'm using the Godfrey Icon, the Shard of Alexander, the Graven Mask Talisman, and the Graven School Talisman. For my flask, I'm using the Magic Shrouding Crack tier and the Opaline Hard tier for extra damage negation. And for my stats and sorceries, I'm using a 171 build on New Game +6, Vigor 60, Mind 25, Endurance is 20, Strength is 20, Dexterity is 19, Intelligence is at 75, Faith is at 24. If you're using a 150 build, do not worry about the Faith at all. Then for our sorceries, I'm using Terra Magica as well as Adula's Moonblade and Chilling Mist. I'm using Magma Shot to reset the Frost, as well as for my casting quick spell, I'm using Glintstone Icecrack. Now this next build I would consider a sleeper build in this list. I had absolutely zero idea that any of the hand weapons were any good, and by that I mean like the Maddening Hand, the Poison Hand, not the fist weapons because those are god tier. However, the Poison Hand is actually incredible. You get the same charged R2 as the Iron Balls or the Spiked Fist, which means you can pull off some really fast damage very quickly. And the way we had this build set up is that with the Maddening Hand's Ash of War, you are going to proc poison in one hit, allowing your Kindred of Rot's Exaltation and your Mushroom Crown to proc their extra 30% damage. Now with this tagged on top of the charged R2s, you are just going to be able to steamroll a good chunk of this game. This build is very fun to play, it is incredibly easy to use, and those are my two favorite attributes of any build that I put together. I really try to focus on the user-friendly builds that do a lot of damage, and this one is definitely up there. Now for our poison build, you're going to be using the Poison Hand, also a dagger with Golden Vow on it. I'm using the Mushroom Crown for extra damage once poison is procced, the Rakshasa armor set for even more damage, the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, the Axe Talisman, the Blade of Mercy, and the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman. For my flask, I'm using the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Spike Crack tier, and when it comes to our stats, this is level 150 build on New Game +2, 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 23 Endurance, 16 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 70 Arcane. The 15 Faith is for the Flame Grant Me Strength, and you can ignore Blood Flame Blade. So lastly, we have our Dancing Reaper class. This is going to be a Reaper class built around the Obsidian Lambda and the immense mobility you get from Dynastic Sickle Play. I've had an absolute blast playing with this build, and it does do a pretty decent amount of damage. This build can be optimized a little bit more if you would like. Obviously, I'm not wearing things like the Rakshasa armor set, but I wanted to go more of a theme with this build, which is why I'm choosing an all black with the Royal Remains helm. But as you can see, the mobility is extravagant in this build. I absolutely love moving back and forth incredibly fast, and the Obsidian Lambda does have a unique charged R2 that hits twice, so we are going to build into charged heavy R2s with this build. I know you do have some innate blood loss on this weapon, but I am not built into bleed at all. We actually only have about 20 arcane with this build, and we went all into dexterity as you get a much better scaling with a B in dex. Now for this last build, we're using the Obsidian Lambda with a dagger with Golden Vow. I'm using whatever armor set you would like to get you over or around that 51 poise mark. I wanted to look like a Reaper, so that's why I've chosen this. I have the Shard of Alexander, the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, and the Axe Talisman. Now for our flask, we're using the Spike Crack tier as well as the Blood-Sucking Crack tier. And when it comes to our stats, we're a level 150 build on New Game +2, Vigor 60, Mind 11, Endurance 20, Strength 16, Dexterity is 80, Intelligence 7, Faith is 15 for Flame Grant Me Strength, and Arcane is at 20. And that is going to be it for our top 5 fun and powerful builds that you can use in Elden Ring Patch 1.16. I have currently just played the very first installment of the network test for Night Rain, and it is absolutely phenomenal, so definitely stay tuned for some more Night Rain content in the future. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification on your way out. And until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.